A really interesting process of going through and finding these moments where, like, oh, that sounds like kind of a clarinet, but also there's like a viola under it, but it's got to be a viola with a mute on it and stuff like that. And just hearing these really specific textures that Kanye gets and that the producers he works with get on these tracks and putting it together with a live orchestra. And then finally hearing a live orchestra play these sounds and execute them so well and have them be coming from real instruments and not just synths and samples was an unbelievable experience, and we're so excited to show it to you.
Really crisp. Bum, ba-da-da-dum, bum. 1, 2, 3.
Sitting here with Yuga and Johan, co-founders of Yeethoven. Can you guys just explain to our audience what you do and what your role is?
Yeah, so I'm Johan. I'm the arranger and composer for Yeethoven, which means I put all the music together, for figuring out what the orchestra is going to play and writing it all out and stuff like that. In the rest of my life, I'm a singer and music producer. I do some string, like an orchestral arranging for hip hop and pop artists. And yeah.
I'm Yuga. I'm one of the co-founders of Yeethoven. I approached Johan about this project. I'm an orchestral conductor, so I'm a conductor of an orchestra in Los Angeles called the Young Musicians Foundation. And I approached Johan about this project because I always wanted to compare the works of Kanye West to something in a classical context, which ended up being Beethoven. So in addition to being an orchestra conductor, just a regular old hip-hop fan.
Johan, you mentioned that you've worked with pop artists or hip-hop artists as well. Who have you worked with?
There's been a bunch of people recently, but especially I did all the strings on Vic Mensa's last album, and I play piano for him a bunch. And I've worked quite a bit with No ID and Alessia Cara on the pop side, and then Mr. Hudson, who, if you're a Kanye fan, you'll definitely know, is a good homie of mine. I play piano and produce for him a bunch.
Yuga, who else have you worked with? I know you do more like the orchestra side, but have you collaborated with anyone in the past?
Yeah, I mean, so I conduct a bunch of different orchestras. I went on tour with the Tokyo Philharmonic last year, which is basically Tokyo's orchestra. I've also worked with, some pop people like this Japanese rock star called Yoshiki. But yeah, most of my work is in classical.
Awesome. So I wanted to kind of just figure out the why. So for our audience that might not be familiar with the polarizing figure that Beethoven was, I mean, I know that he studied under Mozart. He kind of bridged the gap from classical to romantic sound, which I see those similarities in Kanye. But what did you guys see or hear that made you feel like they were an appropriate fit?
I think for us it came down to a lot of formal innovation, the way the songs are constructed, particularly in Kanye's last two albums, Yeezus and Life of Pablo. He pushes the envelope in a lot of ways that Beethoven did in his music.
Yeah, we wanted to figure out, because I actually come from classical, I guess I should have said that. Before the last couple of years, I was pretty much doing classical my whole life. And so we both, coming from the classical world, were very much thinking about why do we like Kanye so much, especially the recent stuff. And a lot of our friends that were in classical too were just thinking, especially with Yeezus, who were just oh my God, this is crazy that this, someone this big is putting out an album that's this weird and out there kind of. Yeah. And we kind of wanted to just do this concert to take a look at what makes it so different, and then kind of show how that shares some things in common with classical.
They were both, Beethoven and Kanye, especially more Yeezus than Life of Pablo, have works that were sonically just chaotic.
Yeah.
How did that process go, where you just looked at the track list from Yeezus, found pieces from Beethoven, and kind of found commonalities? How did you make them work together?
Yeah, I mean that pretty much was the process. We would look at, for instance, the track list of Yeezus and think about for each song what makes it so innovative. And if you really reduce those down to the musical kernel, like the fundamental musical idea, those are the same ideas that Beethoven was building upon. The way you expand the structure of a song or a piece, the way various parts fit together, dynamic contrasts is another big theme. A lot of Beethoven pieces exhibit those same radical innovations.
Yeah, so like with the dynamic contrast, be like just like something really loud and kind of like almost angry or aggressive right next to something that's like beautiful and like soft and kind of sad, like Blood on the Leaves is a song we look at a lot that has those trombones that are beating the hell out of the instrument. Obviously it's like, I think it's a patch that they're playing, but it's that vibe and the drums and the 808s, and then it goes to that Nina Simone sample, and they're sort of like, you're always kind of in between both.
Yeah,
it's very jarring, and Beethoven does the same type of stuff.
So just finding that balance, like with the juxtaposition of sounds.
Exactly.
Johan, as the arranger, you mentioned you have to choose what instruments are, fitted to make what sounds for Kanye's music.
Yeah.
A lot of this stuff now is mixed, electronically, digitally. A lot of these are sometimes not even sounds that could probably be mimicked on a live instrument.
Yeah.
How do you go about finding like those sound matches?
Yeah, well, everything kind of falls into one of two categories. Either it's like stuff that, like the trombones or the piano, where it's clearly already supposed to be a real instrument and you just use a piano or trombone, stuff like that. And then there's a lot of other stuff that's just like synths and 808s and stuff like that, where there's no live instrument that necessarily sounds exactly like it, and you end up just finding these interesting combinations of sounds. Like, a certain distorted synth ends up being a combination of like clarinets, bass clarinet, violas playing like tremolo really fast, and like a bunch of other stuff like that, and you get this grinding sound. Just whatever has to happen really to get the sound.
You guys had mentioned this album, The Life of Pablo, actually is less pop and more classical in its sound. Can you guys explain how that is?
It's definitely both. I mean, it's Yeezus, and then he kind of goes even further with Pablo, is kind of what we're saying. But with I think Yeezus is where it starts really resembling classical for us.
I mean, in T-Lop, aside from the fact that it's like a perpetually unfinished album, right? He keeps changing it and changing it, which is actually something a lot of composers do, right? They keep editing their pieces, up until the day they die. So that's kind of uncommon. But aside from that, in pop music, we often find this verse, chorus, verse, hook, bridge, chorus structure, right, which sort of defines the song. And if you look at the songs in T-Lop, basically almost none of them do that, right? Like think of Wolves or like Highlights, like they're formally like totally off the walls. If you had to kind of write it out and see, okay, what's going on? How does the structure break down? It's very much not of the pop universe.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, exactly. It's not like in Yeezus same. They're just not pop songs, not hip hop songs anymore. They're like pieces of music. They just kind of go where he wants, and each one is like a journey. Some stuff continues into like the next track, or there's like intros and stuff. Like it's just very wide open, formal like rules.
So typically, how long does it take to, let's start from start to finish, identify two songs, put them like on paper, get the orchestra, like give them their notes, and how long does it take to like fully write like one song for this project?
Well, we talked about them. We kind of did it all at once because we wanted to make sure the evening was going to work together and just kind of, So I think the first time around, we spent a few weeks going through music. I think finding the Beethoven, because we limited the Kanye stuff to these two albums. And originally, starting with Yeezus, so like relatively easy to find the songs that we thought would really work in this context, and then it was about going through Beethoven and trying to find the stuff that would really amplify that. So that was a process, and then once we were done with that, I mean, I would sort of sketch out the arrangement, and then we'd send it back and forth a bit, and he'd send feedback and stuff like that. So I think if I was going to go in hard just on the arrangement, on a particular one, I could probably do it in a couple of days. But we just kind of spent a lot of time thinking about it in between. And then rehearsing, I mean, we really do it it's like the concert's this Thursday, the rehearsals are Wednesday, and that's it. So yeah, it's that's always how it is.
Just going through life.
Yeah, but they're great. I mean, they're all like unbelievable performers in this orchestra, so they'll just read it down. They'll play it perfectly, and we'll just be like, yeah, a little faster here, whatever, but not much. Yeah.
How'd you pool the talent for this orchestra?
For this orchestra, we're lucky enough to partner with Lincoln Center, which is like this amazing institution that's always kind of looking to push the boundaries of art. So they obviously have an incredible network of a young, diverse crowd of musicians who are not just pumped to play in orchestra at Lincoln Center, but like pumped to play Kanye, because a lot of orchestra musicians, when are they going to play Kanye West, right? When do you get to be involved on that kind of music? So it's going to be great.
You've mentioned a range, an audience range from as young as 15 to as old as 80 years old at these shows. Just to you two as creatives, what does that mean to see such a broad audience and fans of the classical and Kanye sound just show support for either Beethoven, Kanye, or discovering one or the other?
I mean, I think it's an amazing thing. I personally feel like all too often people get sort of segmented into these subgenres or genres, and if you identify as one thing, you can't be another thing. If you listen, I mean, this is kind of a funny example. I recently posted in a Kanye Facebook group. I was like, hot take, you can like both Kanye West and Taylor Swift at the same time. And I got so much hate for that. I got so many angry reacts. It was like, I was like shocked. I was like, oh my God, I really hit a nerve here. But, at concerts like this, it really gives me joy to see like this truly diverse range of people being able to appreciate art for what it is. Because great art, I don't think should have barriers to entry based on age or race or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really cool, and I think we're both interested more broadly in like projects that do this, that bridge these type of boundaries. So it's just like validating and just. I think this is like the beginning. And just for both of us with what we're trying to do, and like it shows that there's so much potential that you could even just getting kids into the symphony. I mean, I think in one of the orchestras, either the LA one or New York, did a survey about how many people who came had been to an orchestra concert before, and it was less than 50%. So I mean, that's crazy. And so I think, not that it's just about bridging that gap, but I think just seeing that you can, this is entertaining and moving experience can reach anybody.
So you did last year the Yeezus show in LA. Is this your first show in New York coming this week?
Yes, sir.
This coming Thursday? Yeah. You did the show in LA last year, sold out one this year. Your New York show is sold out. What does it mean for the two of you to come to, New York? You're both from Boston, so a little closer to home. What does it mean to come here and not only sell out a historic venue, but partner with the Lincoln Center?
I mean, it's pretty cool, definitely. I mean, I think like we've done stuff, yeah, of course, with that, part of the world before, but neither of us has ever like presented our own concert in Alice Tully, which is the giant hall there. Yeah. So I mean, that's definitely cool, and it's just cool that I think even like 10 years ago, it would have been unlikely that would have happened, and I think it's just gratifying to see that there's like a slight shift in attitudes among the classical world, more openness to different stuff like this.
I mean, yeah, we both encountered sort of in certain pockets, certain communities, unfriendliness towards the idea of like. Either usually it's that we're selling out Beethoven. How dare you, compare him to
people that,
Beethoven?
Like, what?
Yeah, which is crazy because Beethoven was just probably more of an egomaniac than Kanye was.
Yeah, that's always the criticism. Is just like Kanye's ego doesn't need it. It's just like y'all don't know that like Beethoven was like
he was off the walls, man. Like
that's the whole. There's a great quote. I forget the exact words, but it's just he's talking to some prince and he's just like like you don't get it. There'll be like 1,000 princes. There'll only ever be one Beethoven. This is him talking about himself.
It reminds me of
it's like
Kanye had a line where he said he was talking about if they were to rewrite the Bible, would you be in it? He goes, of course I'd be in it. he's like, think about it. There's about 50 to 100 people in the Bible. He goes, I'm one of the 50 most important people on earth. Just like he's got a point. Like he did write Jesus Walk. So
totally.
What do I know?
It's legit.
We're fine with it.
Yeah.
So what other criticisms have you heard? I mean, I'm sure it's more coming from the classical side than it is the hip hop side.
I feel like Kanye fans are generally pretty
receptive.
down with it, which is cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's always interesting to see like if you just kind of watch the audience during the concert, like, because there are some stretches where we're just playing Beethoven for 7 or 8 minutes to see if people kind of zone out, and I think that's not really what happens, and I think that was maybe one place where we were not sure if they would kind of come around on that side of things, but like, I mean, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony starts and people just erupt into applause like in the middle. It's just like, oh shit, like.
I think like, I mean, a lot of the criticism from our perspective is like, it's just, a lot of it is just knee-jerk reaction, right? Like, we're kind of encroaching on this holy space with this brass artist, and people just, it's a lot to stomach. There have been like certain criticisms of like, very detailed, like I remember there was a Pitchfork article that came out that was like, oh, you didn't compare Kanye to Stravinsky and therefore it was a bad concert.
Yeah, the article was
Which
very
is
much just
absurd,
like, why
but-
didn't you do my idea for a concert? Just make your own concert.
Yeah.
But, I don't know.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is insane. I've seen videos from your shows, and what does it feel like to both of you to have the crowd like singing or reciting the words? Because obviously the show goes on without the lyrics, but a lot of fans in the audience just phones come out and they're just like hitting the notes from Waves or Blood on the Leaves. What does that mean to the both of you?
I mean, it's cool. It's definitely like a visceral experience, and it's just cool that people feel that.
Yeah.
In the context of an orchestra concert, that they get that excited and that hyped about something that,
I think it's also like, it's cool that it's both a visceral and like, people want to be challenged, right? People want to be presented with new, like intellectually stimulating experiences, and I think we're trying to provide both of those things.
Yeah, there was definitely like, some moments of what you're talking about where it's just straight up like full hype, like singing along with everything, like lighters in the air type shit. But like, there was a lot of, there's a lot of moments in the concert that are much more just like, just think about this first, and people really respond. I mean, it's a little bit harder to tell because they're not as, like audible about it, but after the concert when people say like, oh, I'm really, because we kind of talk a little bit in the concert, we'll just do like a little bit of explanation about what we're doing each time. And people were always just like really appreciative about that. It's just kind of surprising that people really want this like kind of intellectual thing, more than you'd expect, I think, so that was cool too.
Was it a no-brainer after the success of your show with Yeezus to kind of carry on with whatever project he was coming next, like even predating Life of Pablo? Were you just kind of conversing with each other, like this has to happen again?
I think not. I mean, we weren't necessarily like gonna keep doing it, but Pablo came out like right when because we did Yeethoven previously in 2016. It was just Yeezus, right? So Pablo came out, and I think initially we, like everybody, were just kind of like, wait, what? Because it wasn't really finished, right? And then it was kind of like slowly just settling into the fact that was just kind of the vibe of it. But I think it challenged us, and just that fact alone made us want to explore it. And then when Lincoln Center came along and said we wanted to do this,
perfect opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. So just out of curiosity, would you plan on continuing doing this with just Kanye, or would you open it up to other artists as well?
Well, I think, first of all, Kanye is definitely a rich enough artist that you probably could keep doing it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think both of us, like we said, have interests in kind of bridging these gaps and bringing together combinations you might not expect, both within American music, but also outside of American music. I think there are a couple things we've been talking about, like K-pop. We're pretty interested in.
K-pop is insane.
Yeah.
It's underrated for how weird it gets. That's interesting to us. You're doing that Flying Lotus.
Yeah,
thing,
I'm a big fan of Fly Low. I'm working on an orchestral project of his music. We're talking about doing stuff with like food.
Yeah.
Which
We have
could be
this friend who's like a really cool like chef. I don't know, just like weird experiences combining like,
So just combining new experiences.
Yeah,
for an
exactly.
audience. Anyone particular in hip hop that you've thought about, or anyone that strikes your interest?
Man, I mean, not necessarily hip hop. One that comes to mind for me a lot is Daft Punk. I think you could definitely do a concert like this with Daft Punk.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, I mean,
Kendrick, I mean, in a certain context.
Kendrick,
maybe
I mean,
more with like a jazz man or something.
Yeah, I mean, Damn. I feel like Damn wouldn't necessarily work, but you go back to Pimp, and then that you could make that work. I think Tyler the Creator's latest album, Flower Boy, that lends itself to a lot of treatment, which I think could.
I think part of it's also like
Who Dat Boy would probably be the coolest string presented song.
Yeah.
I think it's also just like with Kanye that he is the producer. Even on a lot of these songs, sometimes like, you know, there's a lot of producers that worked on it, but ultimately he's making like a musical call about the production of these songs, which to us is more similar to like what Beethoven is doing. Like it's like being a composer. So it's like there are great hip hop artists like Kendrick that have made incredibly innovative music, but aren't on the producing side. So it's a little bit, you know what I mean? It's like it's 1 degree removed
so
from
you guys value that relationship between the two.
If we're doing that type of comparison, if we're trying to say like classical composer, you know, auteur, like music producer, like it would want to be someone who has that kind of platform that Kanye or Daft Punk or somebody has, this innovating within that. And there's actually not that many people, which is why we're not just like franchising the shit out of this. Like it really was like Kanye was the only one that ever really came to mind, and that's why we did the concert. And that way I think it's kind of unique.
Personal favorite Kanye albums?
Albums.
Yeah.
For me, I think like it'll always be Dark Twisted Fantasy, because that's kind of what got me into this. Because as I said, I was coming from classical. I was actually like not immersed at all in hip hop music, and that album was coming from classical the first time. I was just like, oh, you can make, you know. So even though it's not quite pushing the certain boundaries that we're talking about in this concert that really start with Yeezus, for me personally, that'll always be just like, you know, an emotional connection.
For me, it's probably a tie between Yeezus and 808s. I feel like 808s, like
two most critical albums.
Yeah, but I feel like people still haven't quite caught up. Yeah, which is crazy, because to me, 808, like the influence that had on the entire industry is so manifest now. It's so obviously clear, and yet people are still coming to terms with the fact that the entire album's auto-tuned.
I think if you were asking what is like objectively the most important Kanye album in terms of like all of culture, like I think that's
808s probably,
to me.
He's said many a times 808s is his favorite of his own album. So I probably, for the same reason, for what it did to culture. I just, as a lifelong Kanye fan, after the late registration, he did a show at Abbey Road Studios.
With the orchestra.
Late orchestration. Yeah.
And I immediately, when I saw your work, I thought of that 17-piece all-female orchestra, like very focused on aesthetics. They all have the red stripe painted on their face. Kanye's in like the black blazer with the red rose like boutonniere. Did that phase did that ever come into like consideration when you guys were thinking about this? Did you like say, oh, that one time Kanye did do a show like this, or did that not even like cross?
I'm sure I watched it. I'm sure Johan did too. I think that was probably its own thing with its own sort of production value. We really made an effort to focus on the musical content because our argument was so reliant upon it. Like, it's less about like, oh, and not to say that's not dope, right? Like, oh, it is cool to do this song with orchestra, and it sounds great, and you have a 17-piece female group, and it looks great. That's great. But for us, it was about, okay, let's treat this as serious art, and because it is, and let's focus on the musical aspects that make it so noteworthy.
Yeah, we're definitely. It's not just like we're trying to make a crazy concert of our favorite songs with an orchestra. It's because it's just so much about like this point we're trying to make. You know what I mean? Awesome. So it's sort of in a different world in that way, but.